Chris Sale has been a godsend.
This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Baseball Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into the Atlanta Baseball Party. I am Jarvis Davis. I got my main man here with me. Grant McAuley is holding it down for the Atlanta Baseball Party. The Atlanta Baseball Party is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedonmlb and use code all lowercase lockedonmlb for a first deposit match up to $100. We'll get into Sean Murphy being back in town, and in the stretch, AJ Smith-Shauver is back. But first, we got to talk about the newcomers, Grant, the new guys that made the All-Star team, and also a very familiar face who made the All-Star team, and Marcell Ozuna, obviously Chris Sale and Reynaldo Lopez. Those guys get named to the All-Star team. But Grant, the interesting thing about that part of it is that coming into the season, I don't know about you, I would have never thought that Chris Sale would be performing to the level that he's performing right now, and also Reynaldo Lopez making it in as a starter and leading the major leagues in ERA. Like, did you kind of see that coming, or this was kind of like one of those things?
No, I'm not going to even begin to claim that I saw that coming. This is one of those things where baseball shows you something that you didn't expect. And it does that a lot, if we're being honest. And it can do it in a good way, and it can do it also in some bad ways. And we've seen from the Braves offense, I didn't expect that either. But we'll table that discussion. We've had it a lot already this year and really focus in on these All-Stars. And what if I told you that the Braves sent so many All-Stars last year, none of those guys going back to the game this year? Instead, it's newcomer Chris Sale, who's no stranger to the All-Star game. Reynaldo Lopez, starter turned reliever, turned back to starter, also going to the All-Star game. And Marcell Ozuna, first one since 2017 when he was still a Miami Marlin. So it's been a minute for all these guys. But when you look at their All-Star cases, it was pretty much undeniable, especially when you talk about Chris Sale, the dominance that he has put forth for the Braves, looking like the pitcher that when you think about Chris Sale's career, this is kind of the way that you envision him pitching. But was he going to be able to do that after all the injuries and all the time off and the stops and starts? And, Father Time is also kind of creeping in the background as it does for everybody. But Chris Sale has turned back the hands of time there and has been one of the best pitchers in baseball. I think maybe front runner for Cy Young in the National League as well. So All-Star, very good. Cy Young, perhaps even better. And then Reynaldo Lopez has just been terrific in returning to a starting role. He had a lot of belief in himself. The Braves let him prove it. And Marcel Ozuna has been the driving force of this offense. So three very deserving candidates and three very deserving All-Stars. And Marcel's going to be doing a little bit extra because he's going to be in that home run derby. So there'll be a little bit of Braves flavor to the All-Star game, but not quite what we saw a year ago in Seattle.
You know what? I want to kind of stay and land on Chris Sale for a little bit, because one of the things that I really appreciate about him, every time when I'm reading stuff, and I'm sure you hadn't gotten the chance to talk to him as well in the locker room and post game, he just sounds like a leader, man. And I feel like sometimes the Braves kind of need that, especially coming from a guy of his ilk, right? Like who has been there before and done that, been one of the best pitchers in the major leagues for quite some time, to the tune of 7 straight All-Stars back in, so now making his 8th All-Star appearance in his first year with this team. So for me, do you feel like this is the type of guy that they need in order to kind of right the ship, within all of that's been going on with the Spencer Strider injury and the Ronald Acuña injury?
Well, certainly the Spencer Strider side of things, losing a Cy Young candidate and then having another one step up that, you expected some good things from Chris Sale. Obviously, they wouldn't have made the trade if they didn't. But could you have expected this? I think that it exceeds anybody's realistic appraisal of what exactly they thought Chris Sale could be, but in the best possible way. And I'll go back to Chris Sale's value to this team. I mean, number one, he's a competitor. And number two, he's just kind of a no-nonsense guy about the way that he does it. He's, very straightforward. He's, concentrates on his job. He executes at a high level. He trusts his catchers. I mean, this is a guy that doesn't even shake off a pitch that's called by whoever's behind the plate. So you can also give a little bit of the tip of the cap to how good he's doing this year, to the fact that, hey, he's got a great partnership working back there, whether it's Sean Murphy or Travis d'Arnaud. This is something that you always want to see when somebody comes into a new scenario what's it going to look like? What's it going to feel like? And it feels like all systems go for Chris Sale. I will say this, and I talked to some of the Braves over the course of the weekend. I talked to Michael Harris a little bit, and I talked to Austin Riley maybe a little bit more in depth about, looking back at every season. It's always its own journey. There are going to be highs and lows individually and collectively. What kind of needs to happen moving forward to get this club and this offense more specifically back on the right track? And, I don't think it's a question of leadership. I don't think it's a question of the message. I certainly don't think it's a question of guys just, they don't care and they've just kind of accepted their fate. That couldn't be further from the truth. But it's hard for a pitcher, especially a guy that's throwing basically mathematically, supposed to be every fifth day, though for Chris, it's been every sixth day this year. It's
True.
hard for that guy to lead from the front, specifically for an offense that it's a totally different side of the game. But I do think 1 through 26, whoever's in that locker room, whoever's in that clubhouse together, that belief is still there in the talent that they have and the ability to go out and get those results. And other guys, AJ Minter told me, the pitchers are going to go through it for a little while, and then the hitting is going to help them. And then as the hitters are going through it, we hope as a pitching staff, we're able to pick up the slack and help out in that regard. So it truly is. I mean, the dictionary definition of a team sport, baseball, requires a lot. And I think that they have the wherewithal and also the staff and the talent, and maybe they get a little better at the trade deadline to get better. But to make a long story short and to really bring it all back to Chris Sale, that was a major piece that was put on the board by Alex Anthopoulos. And I do think that it has resonated in that clubhouse and certainly on the mound.
Yeah, you know what? To your point, like he even talked about, giving Sean Murphy credit because, he didn't have his best stuff last night, right? So when you think about, getting, having the bases loaded and a guy saying, you know what, I'm gonna trust my catcher. I'm gonna trust him. Like you gotta that I think that means something we talk about from a relationship standpoint, having that trust in your guy and Sean Murphy, knowing that he has that trust, I feel like that helps a lot too. So for him to be able to, be in that headspace, even when he's struggling, because, like everybody get into a pinch, hey, I can figure out a way to fix it. But, you continue to trust your guy like Sean Murphy. And I think that is just ultimately just a good way of just building that bond and that relationships within that locker room that you need in order to, try to go on and make a run in the second half of the season. Now, before we get out of here, man, I definitely want to talk about Marcell Ozuna, because you I know we've talked about it before, but I think that for him making this all-star team is kind of like a cherry on top, because I know the first half of the season he was the only one basically, that was consistent at the plate, right? For the most part, and literally carrying his team on his back. So what do you think about Marcell Ozuna, going forward for this team? Like, do they pick up that option and continue to kind of just, hey, we're gonna continue to keep this value of a contract going forward as long as we can?
Yeah, and they've got the one more year on that team option. And when you're go out there and look and try to find how many DHs can give you the potential for 40 homers and 100 runs batted in, hitting close to 300 the way he is this year. I mean, I can't say, and nobody can, that every year is going to be the same. But from a dollars and cents standpoint, it makes an awful lot of sense to, as they say, run it back and have him back in the heart of that order, because there will be some other pieces that will always be in flux. I mean, nobody wanted to lose the National League's MVP 2 months into the season either, but that unfortunately was a card that the Braves and Ronald Acuña Jr. were dealt. Michael Harris, 3 weeks later, landing on the IL for what's going to amount to several weeks, over a month, certainly, with that hamstring strain. You want to have all the pieces that you can have in place. And I feel like having a DH who can be in the middle of that order, whether it's hitting third or fifth or cleanup if you want him to, that's the kind of big bat that it can help drive an offense. And even one that struggled this year, I know you could look at it and say, well, there's other guys that should be able to pick up the slack. There's other guys that should perform better. But I'd found myself asking this question over the first 2 months, especially, and really all season long. I never knew I'd be asking, where would the Braves be without Marcell Ozuna? And I think once you reach that status as a player, you've probably cemented your place as a big part of whatever the plan is for this club. And they did build in that option for exactly this reason. I know the Braves will have some payroll things to look at. They're close to that third luxury tax threshold. That is obviously going to be part of the math at the trade deadline as well. In whatever they get, doesn't mean it'll stop them from getting guys. It's just, that's part of the sport, and that's part of what the general manager's juggling. But if I'm Alex Anthopoulos, and I don't say this lightly, and I certainly don't, pretend to be anything other than a GM by initials, it's going to be a difficult call in going any other way than bringing Marcell Ozuna back for me.
Absolutely. And speaking of performing better, how about this? Coming up next, we'll talk about a guy named by the name of Sean Murphy and talk about what he's been contributing to the Braves lineup as of late.
Episode of the Atlanta Baseball Party is brought to you by Booking.com and Game Time. With summer travel heating up, especially travel for baseball games, it's time to explore those best cities you always secretly wanted to learn more about. Yes, we're talking about your rival cities with hotels, bed and breakfasts, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com. You might just find your perfect stay even in your baseball rival city. From hotels that look over stadiums to family friendly resorts, Booking.com has so many choices across the U.S. for your summer travel this MLB season. And of course, it could be that you want to take a trip to New York so that you can root on the Braves when they take on the rival Mets, or you may want to take a trip to Philly so you can check them out when they take on the Phillies, especially as they seem to be making ground against the Phillies right now. So, this might be a prime opportunity for you to take a try at booking.com. The right stay can make you a fan of any US city, even your rivals. Book today on booking.com on the site or in the booking.com app. Again, that's booking.com. That's the website, or in the booking.com app, because the right stay can make you a fan of any US city. This episode of our Atlanta Baseball Party is also brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. So last-minute deals, you can save up to 60% off buying them for Braves games, for concerts, for comedy shows, for theater, and so much more, which we know there's something going on in Atlanta every single night. So you absolutely have an opportunity to take advantage of those last minute deals. And also, Game Time ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. And they have a lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. And again, create that account and redeem LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute ticket prices, lowest prices guaranteed. So, Jarvis, the Braves hit nine home runs in their 3-game series against the Philadelphia Phillies. So, does that type of power and production at the plate make you feel like the Braves are back?
Yeah, I think that when you look at going up against your division rival, right, and taking the series, and you start to see those backs start to come alive, and you get those guys starting to get into a groove, especially coming up in those in clutch moments too, right? Because that's what matters. That's what we've not been seeing, consistently throughout this entire season. Is those guys coming through with runners in scoring position. So for them to be able to do that, have that type of performance against the Philadelphia Phillies, who are like they're in the hunt right now as far as being one of the better teams in the National League, and you're sitting right behind them on their neck trying to catch them. I feel like the Braves are in a really good spot right now because of what they were able to do in that series and what they've been able to do in these last couple of games against the Arizona Diamondbacks as well.
Yeah, and I think that with that series, it's interesting because I was on with our sister station, Sports Extra, and one of the questions was, how did we think the Braves were going to play out? Like, what was the expectation in that particular series with the Philadelphia Phillies? And I said, win, and win. And I said, I know that maybe a sweep against the major league leading Phillies is a tall order, but the reason I said that is because they had a rare opportunity. It was a situation that they found themselves in where there was no JT Realmuto, there was no Kyle Schwarber, and no Bryce Harper. So when you have those instances, you've got to take advantage. You've got to pounce on that team. And I like the fact that they didn't just beat them, but even when they lost to them, they still scored 6 runs. And I thought that was encouraging. Then they beat them 5-1, and then they beat them again and shut them out 6-0. So I think the way that they beat the Phillies, even more so than the 5-4 win over the Diamondbacks, the 6-2 win over the Diamondbacks, because let's face it, the D-backs are the D-backs of last year that found themselves going on a run to the World Series. They're a different team. They're coming back to being that team, but they haven't rounded out into form any more than the Braves have rounded out in form. So I have my eye more so on what they were doing against the Phillies, and I felt like they did a really solid job of showing what they were able to do, not just in producing runs, but the fact that there were runners in scoring position, and they took advantage of that. How many times have we had conversations this season about the Braves having runners in scoring position and not being able to get the job done? That's part one of what I liked about what I saw with them. Part two, what I liked about it is the fact that we saw different Braves actually make contact with the bat. Because there have been times where we've asked this entire season, where is Matt Olson? Haven't seen him, So I think that is huge as well when you look at that box score and you can see players like Matt Olson being able to do something. I think even Adam Duvall, there was something that I saw on Twitter last night that said, Duval, like, when is the last time we've actually been able to say that? So I think that what we saw or what we've seen in these last 5 games, it's good to see Austin Riley. It's good to see Jared Kelenic do what he's doing in a leadoff position, and even Ozzy Albies. But for me, I was kind of looking down to see, okay, Matt Olson, okay, Sean Murphy, you guys have been unbelievably quiet. Okay, Adam Duvall, you've been unbelievably quiet of late. Where are you? What are you doing? And to see those guys be able to come back and do something, I think was the most encouraging thing to make me say, I think I'm almost, not quite Jarvis, but I'm almost to the point where I can say I believe the Bravos are back. Now, they seem to have figured out a way to come back in the series opener against the Diamondbacks, which I think is also positive, a comeback, because that's also, we've known the Braves to be these last few seasons. The guy who got it started late was the guy I just mentioned, Sean Murphy, 2-run home run in that 9th inning. So what would it mean to this Braves offense for Murphy to finally return to all-star form?
Wow. It will mean the world, because we go back to, Grant and I was talking about all the all-stars that made the team last year, and none of those guys made it this year, so just to be able to see Sean Murphy get back to what he was last year, oh my gosh, he was absolutely amazing, and not only at the plate, but behind the plate too, because Chris Sale talked about after the matchup last night about how Sean Murphy is like integral in, being that guy to lean on when it comes to what pitches to throw and all that stuff, especially like we know that last night he got into a lot of trouble. He got into a lot of trouble. And specifically with the bases loaded right early on. So when you have a guy that you can count on in those moments, behind the plate, it just means a lot. It just gives you a sense of calm, a sense of peace on the mound when you start to get in trouble, and not necessarily say, hey, I have to figure out a way to fix this. So I think from that standpoint, behind the plate and then at the plate, in the month of July, he got a couple home runs. It's early on. So for him to start to give us a little peek of what that looks like for him, like it is so just it's so cool to just watch him, get to that space where he's like a 933 OPS, in the month of July. So, and we talk about the couple of home runs that he's already hit. That is a real good space to be in, because when you have what's been going on, the Armageddon of injuries that has been going on right now for a guy like Sean Murphy, and knowing what he's capable of, we would benefit a lot from a fan standpoint to see Sean Murphy to continue to go on the run like he's been doing.
Yeah, because right now we're talking about someone who's hitting 228, has an OBP of 297 and an OPS of 703, versus him in the 2023 season, where he ends that season averaging 251, which is, great for, not just great, but that's fantastic. But also looking at the rest of his numbers with an OBP of 365 and an OPS of 844. So if he can even get into the ballpark of where he was a season before. I think that's huge. But also what Chris Sale said, how many times have we heard even last season and the season before, especially because we're talking about a younger Max Fried as an example, and we're talking about a younger Spencer Strider when they were saying, hey, Travis d'Arnaud, and even when Sean Murphy came aboard, how important it was for them when they had a catcher who could call a good game, a catcher who could help them to reset when they got in trouble. So yeah, I think that as Sean Murphy kind of rounds back into form, when we talk about that, it's not just rounding back into form at the plate, but it's rounding back into form behind the plate as well. And then we also talk about things like the batting order. I mean, it's been an up and down batting order for the Braves pretty much the entirety of the season, primarily due to injury, right? And It seems like, at least we'll say for the leadoff position, looks like Jarred Kelenic has probably secured that spot. And you see, Ozzie Albies kind of rounding into form and Austin Riley rounding into form as well. So if you can get that for Matt Olson right there in that cleanup spot, and then you start seeing as we go further down into the order that Sean Murphy is doing his thing, then when Michael Harris II, for example, comes back, and if he's put in that ninth spot, that ninth position, it's like you have that second leadoff, but what's happening before you get to that person and that batter is just as important. So yeah, good stuff from Sean Murphy, this, not just this series, but actually the last couple of weeks. Now the Braves might also have some good news because they might be on their way to figuring out the fifth spot. We'll talk about it in the stretch. This episode of the Atlanta Baseball Party is brought to you by PrizePicks. So think about this. We're at a point and a place in the pantheon of sports, right? Where things are kind of shifting because now it's all about baseball. Everything else has kind of been put to the wayside, if you will, because, well, basketball's done, even hockey's done. Now you do have some WNBA ball to consider as well. But ultimately speaking, we're at a point and place in sports where it's all about baseball. So PrizePicks, it's a perfect opportunity for you to take advantage of that fantasy sports app and maybe do a little bit of betting and have some fun for this summer. Now, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app is what PrizePicks is, with over 5 million active members. And listen, PrizePicks has you covered every week because they've got some really cool promos. For example, lowering select player stats projections on Tuesdays to help your lineup hit, or getting your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Fridays. So again, with the finals over, you can also do a little bit with hoops action. Women's basketball is still heating up. Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark, Asia Wilson, Brianna Stewart. These are names that you might want to know because you could win up to 100 times your cash watching them ball out. And the good news is PrizePicks is available in more than 30 states across the country, including Texas, where the All-Star game will be played next week. Maybe you can do a little betting there. Georgia. So, of course, that helps you to bet against the Braves, as well as California. Players and stat types you're selecting, that's the kind of thing that's important. I just mentioned to you, Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark are back and forth in the WNBA battle for Rookie of the Year. So maybe some opportunities there for you as well. Download that PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. It's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks for a deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. So Jarvis, you look at the game last night, right? And you're wondering to yourself, is this one of those opportunities for the Braves just to be able to kind of go on a go on a run, if you will, especially as you're kind of getting closer to, they've already passed the midseason point of the midpoint of the season, by the way, but ultimately you're getting to that all-star break, if you will. So looking at what the Braves have been able to do, 4 straight wins rather, in a row. I mean, that's something that we have not seen from the Braves since June 22nd. Now, that might not seem like a big deal because it's the Braves, and they're, kind of up and down. But if you look at the fact that before that week stretch, it had been probably a month and a half before we saw the Braves do what they were able to do. So now they're in a position to do something that, I don't know, Jarvis, I'd have to double check, but I know if they've swept anybody this season other than the Tigers, it's it had been a long time before we saw that. They have the opportunity now to do that with the Diamondbacks tonight. And they have the opportunity to do that with Uncle Charlie Morton on the mound. He, of course, has been a little bit up and down this season. But what do you expect to see from this Braves team, especially with this opportunity that they have, this rare opportunity that they have to go ahead and sweep these Diamondbacks?
Yeah, I think they're in a great spot because they had their big dog on the mound last night in Zach Gallen. Like, that's their guy, that's their ace, right? And they rattled him for,
Yes.
from start to finish, right? Because he just didn't look comfortable on the mound at all Tuesday. So when you take all of those things into consideration as far as having their best pitcher, their best arm,
Yes.
uncomfortable throughout the entire thing, even when in the 6th inning, when the manager for the Diamondbacks had an opportunity to take him out, and he just let him go up against Adam Duvall. By the way, if Adam Duvall figure out a way how to get it done, he goes
Right.
gets that 3-run home run. So to
Yep.
kind of really put the game away to kind of seal the deal. So when you think
Mhm.
about it from that aspect of it, that is, the Arizona Diamondbacks are in trouble because, like I said, when you have your best guy on the mound and you do what you did to him on Tuesday, you do what you did. Those are some of the things that you have to pay attention to when you're talking about really bringing those brooms out.
Yeah, and something you said, Jarvis, that I think is very important, and that is they got their best pitcher rattled. And
Mhm.
once they got him shaky and they were able to take advantage of him, that's when things kind of turned the tide. And also giving your own pitcher run support in the beginning so that he's not battling from behind. And that's something that we saw in that Philadelphia Phillies series that I also thought was
Sure.
very encouraging. When is the last time, Jarvis, that we were saying that the Braves batters gave their starting pitchers the run support they needed so that if they got in trouble, they knew, well, hey, I'm in trouble a little bit, but at least I'm ahead 2 runs or I'm ahead 3 runs. We haven't been able to say that, or we also haven't been able to say that if the Braves do happen to get behind, even if they go up early, get behind late, they can actually battle their way back into a game and win it. So these are some of the characteristics, some of the traits that we saw consistently last season, that even if
Mhm.
it's a small sample size from late June into early July, we're starting to see them do things that are more characteristics of this Braves organization.
Yeah, and that's what you hope for. And I'm almost at a space where you talk about 4 games in a row. I think it's like 5 straight games that they've scored over 5 runs too,
Yes.
and they've been early. They scored runs early
Yes.
too, and I think though when you think about those things starting to come together, I was like, man, why we gotta have the All-Star game again? Like, can we just keep playing? Like,
Right.
at least let the Braves play out their schedule. Y'all can do whatever y'all want. So let the Braves play out their schedule because these cats are starting to turn this thing around, and hopefully it can continue through the All-Star break and, July 30th is the trade deadline. So hopefully they can be able to add to that.
Indeed. And one other thing that I liked about the win against Philly is, excuse me, I'm sorry, the Diamondbacks win. The first win against the Diamondbacks was
Mhm.
it was 5-4. And we have started to hear echoing in our heads or living rent free in our heads that stat of 0-28 when the opponent scores 4 runs or
Yes.
more. We
Yes.
finally got over that hump. And it may
Yes.
not seem like a big deal, but that's the kind of number that haunts you like, oh my God, that other team scoring 4. What are the Braves going to do? Well, that was finally the game that broke that crazy cycle
Sure.
as well. So I think that was encouraging too. Other thing that's encouraging, the Braves returned AJ Smith-Shauver from his rehab assignment, reinstated him from the IL Tuesday. Of course, they optioned Bryce Elder back to Gwinnett after Monday's game. But how good is it to see Smith-Shauver back in the mix, even if it's just out of the bullpen to start?
Wow, that'd be great. That'd be really great because and I was, when you talking about AJ Smith-Shawver and putting him in the bullpen, obviously when those oblique issues can be really, really sensitive, right? Because if you bring it back too early, he can end up being out longer, and then potentially maybe out for the season because those things can be so sensitive. You talking about torque, at that point, especially with a pitcher.
Yeah.
They need those obliques, if I can put it in simple
Yeah.
form, right? So I think that is the interesting thing for him to be able to come back, and I don't even want to say compete for that fifth role in the starting spot. I just want to say, hey, so he can be able to get back and get better. But I think overall, just the bullpen, it's not like they need him, because like the Braves right now, they're 39-3 when they lead after 6 innings, 40-2 when they're leading after 7, and 44-2 when they're ahead after 8. So the bullpen have been doing their job. They don't need AJ Smith-Shauver. This is strictly for injury concerns and trying to ease him back into the fold. So yeah, this is good news. This is definitely good news for AJ Smith-Shauver to be coming back, because we know what he's capable of.
Right. And I also think if there's ever a situation where Brian Snitker finds himself in need of a bullpen day, if you will, he's the kind of guy that can give you 3 solid innings as a part of the bullpen having Yeah, exactly. So that's what I like about what he brings to the table as well. So when I saw that the Braves were returning him back from that rehab assignment, like you said, not that we're looking for him to immediately be that fifth pitcher, but you at least know that there's somebody strong who is ready to go in that pitching rotation eventually, which might take just a little bit of pressure off Alex Anthopoulos and what he needs to do in the next couple of weeks. Thanks for stopping by the Atlanta Baseball Party. Remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we're free and available wherever you download your podcasts. We'll see you on the Atlanta Sports Party Thursday.